So obviously, it's an incredible time to be a fan of AAA superhero games. We have the Spider-Man franchise from Insomniac that is in its prime right now, and we're going to get more sequels to that inevitably very soon. And on top of that, next year we have Gotham Knights, which is coming from Warner Brothers Games Montreal. And then the following year, in 2022, we have Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League from Rocksteady Studios. And even though many of these games have not yet released, I cannot help but wonder what other DC superheroes are going to be pushed into the video game space in the near future as well. And obviously, I'm going to do a video similar to this for Marvel characters that I'd like to see get their own game. But here I have 5 IPs that are DC superheroes that I'd like to see get a AAA game, and I've also divided them between Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Games Montreal. So there are obviously different styles of gameplay that are being implemented in Gotham Knights that we did not see in the Arkham games, and Rocksteady has a very polished style that they kind of bring to every game that they do. So I have 3 IPs that I think Rocksteady would really excel in, and then 2 that I think Warner Brothers Games Montreal would really excel in, and then I have one bonus one kind of at the end. But let's go ahead and kick it off at number 5 with The Flash from Rocksteady. Now, as I mentioned, Rocksteady has a very specific style to their games. They are really good with fleshing out a character's gameplay. We saw this with Batman time and time again. And they're also really good at utilizing the rogues gallery and creating a really compelling story around the lore of a character. And I think that The Flash would be perfect for that. You could do Barry Allen or Wally West or both, and you could retain some of that multiplayer that we're going to be seeing in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Or they could make it very much single player like the Arkham games, but I think that the speed element would be a lot of fun. I think that the one caveat is that the city would have to be very big in order for the speed mechanics to be any fun, and also there's a lot that would have to be determined. Does time slow down for Barry Allen or Wally West, or is the character really fast? How do you go around corners without bumping into buildings? But I think that overall it's something that Rocksteady would really excel at. Now, this is wholeheartedly just my own spin on something that they could do, but instead of the stealth predator encounters, I think it would be interesting if they set up scenarios similar to the ones that we've seen in some of the more recent X-Men films where Quicksilver has to run around and there are a bunch of dangerous things that are occurring all at once. So for example, shots are being fired, an explosion is happening, and he basically has to run around and either remedy those situations or pull people out of harm's way or set it up so that the enemies are going to knock themselves out by putting the guns close to their foreheads so that then the kick of the fire launches it into their forehead and knocks them out cold. And I think it would be really interesting if instead of these stealthy predator encounters, we had these situations where shots were being fired, an explosion was happening, like I mentioned, and you had to go around in a short amount of time and correct all of these problems before resuming time back to normal. But overall, I think that both from a story perspective and a gameplay perspective, The Flash just has so much potential. And in regards to his rogues gallery, I think they're up there with Spider-Man, maybe a little bit less popular. I don't think it's quite on the level of Batman's rogues gallery, but it's really close. Maybe the second best rogues gallery in DC Comics, on par with, like I mentioned, Spider-Man in Marvel or Superman in DC. I just think it's a really solid lineup of villains that could be added to the story. So at number 4, I have Green Lantern, and this one I actually have from Warner Brothers Games Montreal, and primarily this is because of what we've been seeing with Gotham Knights. It seems like Warner Brothers Games Montreal is moving into more of an Ubisoft RPG open world direction, and we're seeing that with Gotham Knights. You're progressing your character with level building, you are learning new techniques, and it looks very much like Assassin's Creed Valhalla or a game similar to that. And I think that that would work very well for a Green Lantern game. I just feel like a Green Lantern game, in order to really capture the spirit of the Green Lantern IP, would have to be very big in scope, and it would be a huge undertaking for it to be a very narrative-based single-player game. And so I just think that the more Gotham Knights RPG style of gameplay would suit that IP much better. They could bring in the multiplayer mechanics that they're doing for Gotham Knights and allow you to play as any number of Green Lantern characters. And they could really bring in a lot of the Green Lantern villains, and as I mentioned, just open the map up really big. They could also, I think, utilize the powers and abilities in a way that realizes them better than trying to cram them all into one single-player experience, and giving the players a little bit more choice in regards to how they want to use the Green Lantern abilities. But overall, I think that the direction that Warner Brothers Games Montreal is moving with their game model would suit a Green Lantern game very well. Green Lantern is one of those IPs that I've always been hesitant to consider working as a video game just because, again, of the scope of the character and all of the different abilities. But as I've seen games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and what I'm seeing with Gotham Knights, I do think that there's a game model out there that could support that kind of scope and that amount of abilities and just that gigantic of a map for a character like this, and I think that Warner Brothers Games Montreal could do wonders with that. And it'll be interesting to see what they do after Gotham Knights, if they continue doing Bat Family style games or games set in the Bat universe, or if they move on to different characters. And I think it would be really interesting to sort of see their own spin on the DC universe. Obviously, Gotham Knights is not connected to the Arkham games, but it is still a Batman game, and I think it is going to feel more similar to Arkham than many of us are considering. So it will be interesting when they make a game that is wholly their own, something that Rocksteady has not touched, and it will be intriguing to see what they can come up with on that end. At number 3, I have Wonder Woman, and as I've talked about with Arkham, I think that Rocksteady just did such a great job of bringing that character to life, of utilizing his lore and integrating it into the story, using his moveset and creating compelling gameplay around it, and because of all that, they would be my choice developer to do a Wonder Woman game. I think that expanding what they did with the Arkham games, bringing it more in line with a God of War scope game, would work very well for Wonder Woman. And I just think that that's a character that we're starting to see pushed way more into the mainstream, particularly with the Wonder Woman films from Patty Jenkins. And I'd like to see what they could do with her in a video game, and sort of in the same way that they did the Arkham games, where they weren't movie tie-ins or anything, but instead it was very much their own take on the character. That's what I'd like to see. I don't want to see a clone of Gal Gadot in video game form. I want to see Rocksteady's own take on Wonder Woman. I don't really care when they set it, if they do it in modern day, or if they try to take her back to, World War I, World War II. But that actually might be interesting too. I'd like to see a more old school game from those guys, kind of more of a period piece, I guess. Similar to The Flash, I just feel like she has a lot of gameplay potential. Again, she's moving more into the mainstream, so I think that there is definitely a market for her character. And I'd really like to see what they could bring to that lore. And it's going to be interesting to see her alongside, I don't know who they're going to bring into Suicide Squad to kill the Justice League, but Superman, Green Lantern, Flash, if Batman comes back, I'd like to see these characters, and I hope that we get to see them pre or post Brainiac, where they're going to be mind controlled. I'd like to see their actual personalities in this universe. And I am interested to see if any of these characters get their own standalone games after Suicide Squad, either from Rocksteady or from some other studio that Warner Brothers Games commissions to design games based on those characters. But I just think that Wonder Woman is a really interesting candidate, and I'm excited to see her character, as I mentioned in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, assuming she'll be in the game. But I think that she is one of my top picks to get a standalone game. So at number 2, I have Aquaman, and I don't feel like this is a character that many people would have been petitioning to get a video game. Back in 2014, I don't think that Aquaman would have been considered to have a very big market that you could sell this game to. But since the film grossed over $1 billion, it's clear that there is marketability for this character, and he is becoming a household name more than he was before that film came out. Obviously, people knew who he was, but not a lot of people really understood the character or who he was or what his abilities were. But having seen the film and having been a fan of the character before the film myself, I also think that there's a lot of potential for the location. They could create an open world Atlantis. Maybe he can go above water as well. I don't know. But I think that Aquaman in particular would work better in Warner Brothers Games Montreal's RPG formula that they are building. Like Wonder Woman, I feel like his DCEU film really upped his popularity, but then also like the Green Lantern IP that I mentioned, I just feel like this game would have to be really big in scope, and I think that the gameplay model and the story would probably work best with more of an RPG style game, where maybe Atlantis has been conquered by some villain, and you have to go and piece by piece take the city back, level your character up, and I don't know. It would be interesting to see what kind of abilities they could bring to the table. If he could summon sharks, some of the gameplay with your trident. It's sort of interesting because I don't feel like I need an Aquaman game. Like, I'm not sitting here recording this video just like fantasizing about how cool an Aquaman game would be. But at the same time, I just look at the potential of the gameplay and the setting, and if the right developer did the right thing with that character and his world, I really do feel like they could create something really special. and they could build upon what the character is and create something that is a must play, an absolute must play for a DC game fan like myself. So at number one, and then remember I have a bonus after number one, but at number one I have Superman, and I just got to go with Rocksteady. As I mentioned, what they did with Batman was just so pure to that character, and I feel like they made a gaming experience that just so perfectly encapsulates who Batman is, and they built a lore that is very faithful to who the character is in the comics while also being its own thing. And that's the treatment that I would like to see Superman get. I wouldn't really love a Superman RPG on the same level that I would love a single-player narrative-driven Superman game. I just feel like Clark Kent, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor would create a really compelling story on the level of something like Arkham, or perhaps even better. I understand the concerns that a Superman game would just be too big and that the scale of the game would have to be too big for that style of game, but I gotta be honest, even back in 2006, the Superman Returns game had a massive map, and you pretty much were able to control all of Superman's abilities. And if the gameplay had been a little bit better, if the story had been more compelling, I think we would have been looking at like the Spider-Man 2 of Superman games. And I think that with today's modern technology and what they can pull off, I really don't see why a Superman game would not work. We're already getting an open world Metropolis and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So who knows, maybe they're building the groundwork to create a Superman game. Maybe they'll have the setting all ready and they'll reuse the map from Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League and expand upon it, and then create gameplay for Superman or something. I just think that the character really deserves his time in a AAA game in the modern day. We've had some pretty solid attempts in the past, but I don't think that the technology was quite there yet. But we're already seeing games that match the scale of a Superman game, and I don't think there's any reason that the developers of Arkham Knight could not pull it off. So finally, at the very end, I have Justice League, and this one is really tricky because I think it could work with either game model. I think that you could make a live service RPG-based Justice League game, or I think that you could make a very narrative-driven single-player Justice League experience. And so I think that the best option would be for both studios to collaborate on this game, or to perhaps bring in other studios to do it. I think that the Justice League game needs to do what the Avengers game did not, which is they need a team that is up to the task of creating an experience on the same level of quality as that of the Arkham games or of Spider-Man PS4, but doing it for each of the characters. And I feel like Marvel's Avengers didn't have enough time or enough developers or the right game model behind it. And so I think that collaborating on this game and sort of allowing all of the DC Games developers to sort of come together. And I don't really care if it's set in the Gotham Knights universe or the Arkham universe, but honestly, I'd probably prefer the Arkham universe. But I just think that allowing all of these different developers to come together and utilize all their strengths to bring the best game forward would definitely be the best way to go on that. But anyways, thanks you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below which DC games you would like to see in the future, and we'll see you guys in the next one.